Welcome, friends, to another exciting episode of A VGM Journey. And I'm your host, The Messenger. The track that we're playing in today's show is Title Theme from the game Time Trax, and it was composed by Tim Follin. once again, I got a fun and exciting show, and I even have a very special guest with me. Here's Mr. Ed Wilson of the VG Embassy. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Mr. the Messenger, it's so good to be here, man. I'm so glad you invited me on the show because I've been listening forever, and I'm really excited to chat with you. It's been a while since we've been on a podcast together, so I missed hanging out with you.
Yeah, I want to say maybe it was last summer that I did some kind of a podcast with you.
Yeah, I think you were on VG Embassy. We did the Game & Watch show. That was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it was a good time.
For sure. And I'm so happy that you brought the show in with some Tim Follin, especially Time Tracks, because that soundtrack rules. And it was almost lost to time. Like, the game never came out. The soundtrack was nowhere. And then some dude found it, like one of the developers found it in their closet and dumped the ROM onto the web so that everybody could play the game and listen to Fallin's awesome music. So this soundtrack's really special.
Yeah, I had a feeling that you were going to really appreciate that. I've been wanting to get you on the show since pretty much the beginning, and I just kind of took me a while to work up the nerve to invite you to the show.
Well, I'm glad that you did, man. VG Embassy has been on a little bit of a hiatus. It's more like a slower release drip. I'm still working on shows. They're just not coming out as often. And I did, in several places say, hey, if you guys are looking for a guest for your VGM podcast, hit me up, because I got burned out on the editing and the production, but I still love sitting with people and chatting about video game music and sharing video game music. So to be able to be on other people's shows is still a great joy. So I was ecstatic when you reached out to me.
When you told me that you were totally down with doing this, like, it kind of just hit me big time. Like, oh man, he's really going to be doing this. And, I really don't say this too often, but you're one of those guys that I really look up to in the VGM podcasting community. So, it is, a huge honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, man. That means a lot to me. I've watched this community that we've had grow over the past 6-7 years since Pixel Tunes started back in what was it now, 2014, something like that. It was a long time ago. And Alex, you just went from a ninja that used to drop off music on VGM Jukebox, and now you've got your own show. And I was just telling you before we started recording, just the difference in your production and quality from episode 1 to your milestone episode 50 not too long ago has been incredible. And I was just like, dude, I'm proud of you. You wanted to do, I felt like you've wanted to do this forever, and you finally made your dream come true. So that's so awesome, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
That kind of hits me in the feels a little bit. knowing that I made you proud, I mean, that makes me feel good.
Well, you deserve it.
There's not a whole lot of words I could say about it.
Well, then maybe we should just celebrate with some awesome VGM. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Normally, I don't really do theme episodes on the show, but you brought a pretty fun and interesting theme to me. So what did you bring?
Yeah, well, when you first approached me, you were like, do you want to just share a bunch of your favorite VGM? And I was like, wow, that's wide-reaching. How am I going to pick my favorites? I was like, maybe to make it a little easier for me, why don't I narrow down the scope of favorites? And I had been kind of toying with the concept of doing a entirely FM music-based episode of the VG Embassy. And I was like, well, why not move it over to VGM Journey? I'll pick some of my absolute favorite FM synthesis video game music tracks, and we'll just bang them out, and we'll just have a whole hardcore episode of real good FM jams. And, most of these tracks I think I've played on other podcasts before. I don't think any of them have been on VGM Journey, and I don't think I've played any of them on VG Embassy either. I think most of these I've shared at some point either on Pixel Tunes or have guested on other shows. And so, you might be familiar with them. And if you're not, then they're going to be a whole bunch of really good tracks that are brand new to you, and hopefully some soundtracks that you might want to listen to more of.
I was actually going to hold off on a surprise until later in the show, but one of the tracks that you did pick was played on VGM Journey before.
Oh no, I didn't even know that. I should have gone back and looked. I have listened to all the episodes, but with 50 of them, it's difficult to remember every single one of them.
Yeah, I actually went quiet on it on purpose, too.
Well, I promise I will have probably different things to say about it than you did on your original play.
Oh, yes. Definitely for sure. So, Ed, what's the first track that you want to play?
All right, so to start off, we are going to... I mean, you can't do an FM show without, like, the grandfather of awesome FM music, Yuzo Koshiro, right? So we are going to start off with one of his Sharp X68000 soundtracks. This is from a game called Bosconian. It's basically a port of the Namco arcade game, and the track title is Flash, Flash, Flash. All right, welcome back. That was Flash, Flash, Flash from the Sharp X68000 port of Bosconian, composed by Yuzo Koshiro. This is one of the, bonus songs in the game. A lot of the music in the game is basically Yuzo Koshirized versions of the original arcade melodies, but this one is a completely original one written by Koshiro himself, and I absolutely love it. What did you think of this one, sir?
I thought that was pretty amazing. Yuzo Koshiro, he does a lot of pretty amazing stuff, and I actually wasn't really familiar with this soundtrack until you shared this track with me, and that was some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, his Sharp X68000 work doesn't get nearly as much love as his stuff on the Genesis, or, his more recent stuff like Etrian Odyssey and stuff like that, so I feel like this stuff needs to be shared, for sure. I don't remember when I actually played this on Pixel Tunes. It might have been like a free pick show, or it might have been a very early show where we did like a focus on Yuzo himself. But either way, it was like, I remember playing this and Mike was like, whoa, that was insane, dude. He had never heard it either. So yeah, I mean, I love this track because it's got elements of so much of Koshiro's other compositions. It sounds a little bit like some of the stuff that he did with Falcom. It's got that very heroic kind of melody that you would get maybe in like the Yeez series, or there was a soundtrack he did for a game called Wanderers from Super Scheme, which had a track called I'll Save You All My Justice. It's very similar to that. But then at the end, it kind of breaks down and gets almost kind of evil sounding. And you get this like kind of Arabian like lead come in. And it just gets really, really dark. And then goes back into that heroic part again. So I think in varying up the mood of the song, it keeps it really, really fresh. And the game itself is like super simple. It's this top-down space shooter game where you just basically fly around and destroy bases and use a little map to, figure out where you need to go to destroy the targets on the screen. And the music just blows away anything that's going on the screen. Like, they don't match in terms of quality. The music is way better than the game is.
I do agree with you on that because I've played Bosconian like a little bit, and actually this is pretty odd. My experience with the game was actually the arcade port on one of those Jack's Pacific TV plug-and play kind of games.
Yeah, I remember those. Yep.
And they had a couple of them that they were some Namco arcade collections. And I played the game and I was like, it's okay, I guess. I'd much rather be playing Galaga or Miss Pac-Man or Dig Dug or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. And you normally didn't see Yuzo Koshiro doing like arcade ports like this either. So, most of his games were either original IPs or, he'd be doing like big RPGs or something like that. So to see him working on a really simple like arcade port that was originally released back in the 80s for, a Japanese computer system is kind of a rare treat. And the Sharp X68000 has such a nice FM chip. It's got a YM2151, and the sampler is much stronger than it is on the Genesis, so he can get those really thick drum samples and a lot of those cymbal crashes that sound really crisp that you normally don't hear on the Genesis. So I think, these songs that he did for the X68000 really went a much longer way in terms of percussion and sound maybe a little bit more like what he did with like Super Adventure Island on the SNES and stuff. You can tell he really wanted to play with drums a lot, and he didn't really have that opportunity too much on the Genesis because of that.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I think it is a really odd choice that he was composing music for a game like this, because I don't want to be that guy, but I think the music is way too good for this game. Like, if it was anything else, I would be like, okay, this makes sense, but this is some really good stuff.
It is indeed. So, I like sharing this stuff about Yuzo because I feel like he gets pigeonholed in the American or the Western perception of him just for being like the Streets of Rage guy, and he's got so much more out there than that. So hopefully, you guys, if you haven't checked out his Sharp X68000 soundtracks or his PC-98 soundtracks, you'll go and look those up because they're all incredible.
Is there anything else that you want to say about Bosconian or Yuzo Koshiro or anybody like that?
Oh man, as like I said, as far as the game goes, it's simple. There's not too much to talk about, so scratch it, or I'm raring to get into the next track if you are set to go.
All right. So, what else do you have for me, Ed?
All right, so if you are a Pixel Tunes fan, you might remember this one from our Jalico episode. This is, like, in my opinion, one of the greatest FM compositions ever put to video game. This is a track called Interception Mission 1 from an arcade game called Cybattler, and the composers are only pseudonyms, and I don't know much about them. They're known as POW, Masaaki, Tsugumi, and Kikki.
All right, let's give that a listen. That track that you guys just listened to, that was Interception, also known as Mission 1, from the game Cybattler, and it was composed by Pal, Masaaki, Tsugumi, and Kikki.
Indeed. Oh man, I can't say enough awesome things about this song. It is just a hardcore driving FM metal jam. Super fast rhythm, that galloping bass. It's like awesome solo after awesome solo. It reminds me a lot of like the Taito Zuntada stuff, where it was basically built to be played live, and you know, different musicians would just come out and like show off their chops as like the rhythm section ground it out in the background. So the style of this song really caught me as soon as I heard it, and I was just like, nope. I have to play this as many places as I possibly can because it's too good not to. What were your impressions of it, man?
I think for starters, like, I was pretty impressed with the percussions and the drums. I think that was kind of the first thing that stood out to me about that track.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought it was pretty amazing as well. And all the different sections and the places that this song would go. Like, I kind of thought I was, getting a certain vibe with the song, and then it would just shift somewhere else, and I'd be like, you know what? This is pretty amazing stuff, too.
Yeah, it's crazy how even though like the bass line and the drums stay the same, the leads over it could change the mood of the song so intensely. Whether you've just got these like kind of saxophony or brassy leads, and then again, like that kind of like Middle Eastern kind of almost like a flute-ish kind of thing, very similar to that breakdown in Bosconian. Maybe I've just got a thing for that kind of Middle Eastern lead. I don't know what it is, but a lot of my tracks have an instrument like that does a solo, and it just really gets me for some reason.
To be honest, I actually really don't know too much about this game. I mean, what kind of game is it, and what do you do?
So it's a pretty standard vertical shoot 'em up. So it's a Jaleco game. It was released on the Jaleco Mega System 1, which is actually kind of similar in build to a Sharp X68000. It's actually got the same sound chip. It's got the YM2151 in it, along with a OKI sampler like the X68000 does. And then it also has an additional YM2203 chip, which is the OPN. It's the same chip that was in like the PC88. So it's got a ton of FM channels that all run together. So that's why you're hearing like so many different instruments and so much crazy stuff going on at once. And then it still has room left over for all the sound effects that a shoot 'em up would have. So I think that's why this song sounds so layered, why there's so many different things going on. The composers just had so much room to do so much crazy stuff. I would love to hear this song like performed live. The game itself, again, it's not as simple as Bosconian. Like it feels like a genuine 16-bit arcade vertical screen shoot 'em up. There's parallax and very cool graphics. It goes super fast. It's really smooth. It's a great game, but it doesn't break any ground. There's not any super special graphical effects. There's no, mind-blowing combo system or anything. It's just your standard run-of-the-mill 90s vertical shoot 'em up. And this song, especially in Mission 1, just makes the game seem that much more hardcore because, just imagine playing a video game to this song. Like, you're gonna be pumped regardless of what's going on the screen. So I think the subsequent music in stages after this are good, but this song is the absolute standout from the whole soundtrack. It just blew me away the first time I heard it. The cool thing about this game is that it just got released as an arcade archive game for the Switch, so you can actually download it and play it at home now as an official release and jam out to this tune. I know it's on the Switch for sure. I'm not sure if it came out on like PS4 or anything like that, but I do know you can go into the eShop and purchase this game right now.
I might have to look into that. It definitely has my attention.
Yeah, it's good. Look at some video on YouTube before you buy it just to see if it, suits your fancy. Just for this, it's probably not very expensive. I'm sure it's under $10. Usually those arcade games are. But just to have this song play while you're playing a video game is worth it, in my opinion.
That's definitely good to hear. And Ed, is there anything else that you want to say about this track or Cybattler?
Only that I wish we knew more about these composers so I could seek them out and listen to more music composed by them. But as it is, these names don't really appear in many other games at all. I think a couple of them maybe have done like sound effects for a couple of other games, but it would be very cool if I could find more stuff that they composed that were, equal in quality to this, or at least in the same kind of style. That would be really awesome. But I'm ready to move on to the next track if you are.
I am. And, speaking of wanting to know more about composers and stuff, I know that you're going to have this issue with the next track. So what do you got?
Yeah, so this one is I'll go as far to say this is a VGM podcast standard at this point. It's been played on a lot of different shows, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back from it. But The song is called Match Tune. It's from a game. It's a Dojin game for the Mega Drive called Dial Q-O Mawase. It is a strip mahjong game for the Genesis. It's unlicensed. And we don't know who the composer is. And again, I really wish I did because the song's got such a groove to it. So let's take a listen. All right, that groovy tune was Match Tune from Dial Q-O Mawase for the Mega Drive. It was an unlicensed game by an unlisted composer, and that is a shame because this is a stanky jam, dude. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I thought Mr. or Mrs. Unknown, they did a pretty good job on this track. Where do I even begin? I guess for starters, the sort of slap bass sound, I thought that was pretty cool, and I think even the voice samples, I kind of grabbed my attention a little bit. And you said this was for a strip mahjong game?
I did. It came out shortly after the Genesis stopped, or the Mega Drive in Japan, stopped having games made for it. So it's a relatively old, unlicensed game. And yeah, so I guess it's a hack. Technically a hack of a different mahjong game for the Genesis. Like, they used the same engine, but they redid the graphics. They added an entirely new soundtrack, and then they packaged it up and they actually put it out for retail sale. Like, you could, there are cartridges of this game that exist that were sold back in the day. And I just, the way I found it was, there's a website called Project 2612, which is it's kind of an archive of Genesis chiptune files. So you can, download them, and if you have the right player, you can listen to them. And once in a while, there's a forum kind of built onto that site that people that make these files can chat amongst each other and say, hey, I'm having a problem making this one, can you help? Or, hey, does this sound right to you? Does it match what's playing on a real Genesis? And this soundtrack was just sitting in a forum thread. It hadn't been fully uploaded to the site yet. It was kind of like a candidate for a soundtrack. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of this game. I'll check this one out. I was, in the market for some new and obscure stuff for Pixel Tunes, and I downloaded the soundtrack and was like, whoa, this is so good. Like, this is just an absolute groove. I love this stuff. This track in particular, the Match Tune, really stood out to me, and so I put it on the show, and Mike dug it. So since then, it's been put up in the actual proper Project 2612 collection, but at the point where I played it on the show, it was like absolutely unknown. Like, nobody knew what the heck it was, and it got attention. So Josh and Emily from VGM Jukebox, they really liked it. So one of them played it on the VGM Jukebox. So that was cool. That was the second place it appeared. And then the Dyad, God bless his soul, when he was still making VGM podcasts. They were incredible. He really enjoyed it, so he put it on one of his shows. So the song kind of like made the rounds, and it was so cool to hear that a track that I kind of discovered in this dark corner of the web impressed so many people that they wanted to put it on their own shows as well. And so here we are. I'm sharing it again with you and hoping that you and your listeners enjoy it too.
Well, I definitely enjoyed it. And, I was thinking that I'm pretty sure I also heard this on Hammock's show KVGM. And if he hasn't played it...
That might be right, yep.
And if he hasn't played it, I think this would totally be up his alley. So I know he likes to play a lot of the smooth jams and stuff, and I think he was the first person that I thought of when we were listening to it.
Yeah, it's a little up-tempo from the stuff that he normally plays, but I think it's got that kind of smooth, especially that bass line is just so good. I remember that was what really hooked me, and when I was playing it for Mike on Pixel Tunes, he was like, yeah, I was okay with it, but then I heard those hey voice samples, and then I immediately liked it. He's like, I just love voice samples in songs. I was like, well, if that's what it takes, that's fine. That's fine with me, man, as long as you dig it, because it was cool. So, and I've wanted to like share other tracks from this game on different shows, but I always end up coming back to this one. I don't know what it is about this particular song, but it just grabs me so much. Grabs me in all the right places, my special parts.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's a simple sounding track, but it just does a lot of the little things right. I mean, I'm not really much of a music expert, so I can't really describe what's working for me, but it's definitely a track that just works.
Right, it knows... The composer knew FM. Like, they knew exactly which instruments to use in which situations, and I think the sound and instrument choice was spot on. Like, that bass groove matches perfectly with that bass tone, and those little, like, woodblock hits on the drums just sound so perfect. Along with that bass. So everything just kind of worked together very well.
Have you tried out the game by any chance?
Oh, yeah, a little bit, but it's all in Japanese. A lot of it is like visual novel type stuff where like you have to like browse this menu that's like a phone book, and then you have to dial the number into the phone in front of you, and then you call a girl to play mahjong with you. So depending on which girl you pick, you'll play them in the game. And I don't know if you play over the phone or if you go to their house or she comes to you. I don't know how it works. But then as you play mahjong, if they start to lose, then they start losing clothing and stuff. But I don't know how to play mahjong, and I especially wouldn't know how to play it even if the instructions were in Japanese, so I haven't gotten to that part. But I've seen a little bit of gameplay online, but even then I think that the whoever was recording the footage wasn't a Japanese speaker either, so they didn't do very well. So... it's interesting. I'd like to see somebody be good at this game just to see, not that I'm pervy or anything, but just to see how the game progresses. How risque does it actually get for a Genesis game?
Well, I think it's definitely one of those games that I'm not going to really take my chances with, and especially not to play that in front of the kids or anything. So
no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, there's only so much you can do with like the Genesis color palette. So was it like 64 colors on screen at once? Like,
yeah, I mean, it might.
That's a decent amount of skin tone, I guess.
It might look okay, but nothing that will like really just knock your socks off or anything like that. So
exactly. All right. So, are you ready for the next track?
Oh yeah.
All right. So this one has been my ringtone. Actually, it's not currently my ringtone. I switched it over to a Paprium track when I got into that game, but this one was my ringtone forever. This is another arcade port, and we're gonna listen to the Chelnov theme, Stage 1 from Atomic Runner. This one is composed by Koremasa, Azusa Hara, Tatsuya Kiuchi, and Hiroaki Yoshida. And I believe it was arranged for the Genesis by Emi Shimizu.
that awesome track that you just heard, that was Chelnov theme, stage 1 from the game Atomic Runner, and it was composed by Koremasa, Azusa Hara, Tatsuya Kiuchi, and Hiroaki Yoshida.
Yes, sir. And a little bit of update to that. So I was looking a little more into the actual composer notes, and so Koremasa, his real name is Masaaki Iwasaki, and he's a fairly prolific Data East composer. He arranged the music for the Mega Drive and Genesis, so the original arcade music was written by Azusa Hara and Tatsuya Kiuchi. So there we go. I just wanted to give proper credit to everybody that deserves it. And like I said, this was my ringtone forever, and it starts off great. It's a great ringtone to start out, like da 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 da. Like every time my phone would ring, I would start dancing, and I sent so many people to voicemail accidentally because I just wanted the song to keep playing and never actually ended up answering the phone. So, yeah, I guess that, it's good and bad at the same time. But it's a testament to the awesomeness of the song that I've heard it so many times as a ringtone and still love jamming out to it to this day. What'd you think of it, dude?
I thought it was pretty good. I was definitely getting a Double Dragon kind of vibe out of it, especially with the bass. I mean, I think
yeah.
I think it kind of helped that it was a Data East game, so I think that probably contributed to me thinking of that. That was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, there are a few of the more like upbeat tracks from Double Dragon have that kind of it's almost like a Russian kind of a feel to it. So da 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 da. Yeah. Okay, I can totally hear that now. I didn't even make that connection, but that's a very astute observation, sir. I love it because of the bass groove. I love it again, very similarly to Flash, Flash, Flash and Interception. I love when songs have kind of a steady underlying beat, a very driving beat, and lots of different instrumental parts over it, and I feel like this one has that same kind of feel to it. It's just feels like a whole bunch of musicians come in and jam on their own instrument and then run backstage, and then somebody else comes out, and the bassist and the drummer are just sitting there and pounding away, and I love that kind of feel to a song, so this one definitely gives me that impression as well. As opposed to the arcade version, I love the arrangement for this one because the drums hit harder. The bass sound is a little more sawtoothy. It's a little more grindy. Like it just has much more punch over the original arcade version of this song. So that's why I like picking this one instead of the original version. I think Masaaki Iwasaki did a fantastic job with the arrangement for this one. Have you ever played this game?
I haven't, and I gotta say, I definitely agree with you about the drums. So I was actually really liking the drum work on this, just like that Cybattler track that you shared. I think just like that bass, I mean, the drum work, I thought it was pretty fantastic.
It's my weak spot for FM music, for sure. I love FM, but I love it even more when it's paired with a good sampler. I think sample drums are almost necessary, in my opinion, for really good FM jams. FM can do great in a kind of a more of a laid-back or like an orchestral kind of song without having a sampler for percussion. But if you're going to do a rock track like this or the Cybattler tune, you really, really need a sampler to beef up your percussion to get that, to be a good accompaniment to that really thick bass. When you have a thick FM bass and drums that are like psh, 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 it doesn't work for me. It doesn't accentuate the bass the way it needs to. So I'm glad that they were able to use the sample channel for the percussion for this one because it really made a big difference. The game itself is a side-scrolling shooter. It feels like it could be very similar to Contra, but the screen auto-scrolls. So you're constantly running forward. If you press the opposite direction of the way that you're running, you actually just stop. And then once the screen catches up with you, it kind of drags you along. So it's really frenetic. You have to keep, it's basically you have to speed run the game the first time you play it. And you really have to memorize where everything is. As you jump, you do a flip. And then when you flip, you shoot in the direction that you're currently flipped in, so you'll shoot in a circle as you jump. You don't have really control of where you're shooting while you're jumping, so there's a lot of challenging aspects to this game, but it is also a lot of fun to play, and it's not very long, so it's pretty easy to kind of get good at it, and once you're good at it, you can just run through it and beat it. But I love playing the first stage over and over again, simply because I get to listen to the Chelnov theme over and over again.
That does sound like that can be really frustrating a little bit, especially when you don't have too much of a control with your shooting while you're jumping. So, I mean, you could be just a little pixel off and it just totally throws off your aim.
Yeah, I guess that's the reason why they called it Atomic Runner, because your suit is atomic powered, and you need to keep running to keep the suit cool. If you stop, then it overheats and you explode or whatever. So that's kind of the justification they used for having an auto-scrolling game, which I thought was cool. You know, they kind of built it in.
You know, actually, I think I kind of changed my opinion on that just based off of that description. So it's like, oh, what is that movie in the 90s with the bus?
Oh, Speed.
Speed. Is it kind of like that?
I mean, in a sense, I guess. It's just like, the auto-scrolling games, or the auto-scrolling levels in Super Mario 3 or Super Mario World. Like, it's just very similar to that, where you just need to get through the level and the game scrolls automatically from left to right. So it doesn't, it's not like if you stop, you like have a heat meter that goes up and explodes. It's just like I said, you stop and then it just kind of drags you along for the ride, whether you want to or not. All right, man. So ready for the next track?
I am. What you got?
All right. So this one is complex, both in compositional style and in timing. It's got some. It's a very unique FM track, and it's very, very dear to me. I can listen to this one over and over again. This one's called Shock 72. It's the Stage 1 boss from Genocide 2, Master of the Dark Communion, and it's composed by Hideyuki Shimano and Naoyuki Kimura. This one's also for the Sharp X68000. All right, that was Shock 72, the Stage 1 boss from Genocide 2, Master of the Dark Communion. This was the Sharp X68000 version of the track. I think this game also came out on the Mega Drive, only in Japan as well. This was composed by Hideyuki, Shimano, and Naoyuki Kimura. And, I said ahead of time the song was a little different, a little strange, and Alex was like, yeah, I totally agree with you, as we were talking before we started getting back into the recording. I love it, because it sounds so dark and evil, and the drum programming is just out of this world. Like, it keeps a 4/4 beat, but there's no discernible pattern to that drums section there. It's crazy, but you've got that steady, real, crazy, smooth bass line, and then it always matches those little, like those staccato notes at the end of every measure. Bum 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 ba dum ba dum ba dum bum, and I just always end up nodding my head, like regardless of what I'm doing. Like I'm always like bang 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 over and over again as that part comes in. And I'm realizing as I've lined all these songs up together that I have some sort of weird fetish for Middle Eastern flute solos in my FM music. I'm like, oh my god, all of these have that weird instrument. I don't know why, but for some reason I just love that tone as well. So I'm curious, man, what did you think of? Did it sound as weird to you as I was describing before we started listening?
It definitely did. And I wasn't, I think going into it, I wasn't really prepared on how weird it is. Like, it's not like in your face weird. It's just, I think when I listen to it, especially with the drums, it just seems kind of off. Like, so I was trying to like follow along, and I would think when it goes for like the big hits, I would think it would happen at a certain point, but it doesn't, and actually it holds off on doing that until like a couple beats later. And for a boss,
it keeps you on your toes.
For a boss theme, I also think it's really odd. So I mean, it does kind of have like that dark feeling to it, but I think normally with a boss theme, it's a lot more, I would say, fast paced and I guess in your face as well. So
yeah,
it's just odd all around.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine this song playing in a game like Snatcher or something, where you're in like a cyberpunk city and there's not a lot of... It has like a very kind of film noir bassline feel to it, I think. It's a little more energetic than that kind of a song, but I feel like if this was in like a Sega CD detective cyberpunk kind of game, like this music would fit really well in there. It doesn't, you're right, it doesn't sound like that much of a boss theme to me. And the boss goes down pretty quickly too. It's like the stage 1 boss, and so it's not that difficult. So I don't even think you ever get to that end part while you're playing the game anyway. And that's one of my favorite parts, where all the instruments drop out and that FM bass line just kind of like dissolves, and you have that one tone, and you're just listening to, you're like, where's the loop? Like, what's going to happen? And then the hi-hats, and then the drums start back in again. Like, I love that part so much. I don't know. It's going to be a love it or hate it kind of song, I think, for the listeners. I'm really curious what people will say about this one in your Discord. If they think Shock 72 is the greatest of all time, like I think, or if they're just kind of like, dude, what are you smoking? Why are you listening to this weird stuff?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I know it's going to be a track that they're going to be talking about it. I'm not sure if it's going to be for the right reason, but they will definitely be talking about this track.
As a guy who also does a goth industrial darkwave podcast, I am very used to people raising one eyebrow at the music I listen to, so I have thick skin. Lay it on. That's totally fine. So remember when your former guest Ryan Steele kind of laid into me for picking that Kinseed track? Like, I took it in stride, right? So I can take it in stride if people don't like this one either.
I did forget that Ryan was just kind of like, you know what? I'm not gonna BS you. I'm just gonna lay it all out there, and I'm gonna tell you what's up.
I changed his name in my Discord to Kinseed Destroyer for like a week. It's like he's never going to live that one down. It was really funny. All right, man. So the game itself is actually pretty good. It was made by, if I recall, some of the team members that later went on to work on Gunstar Heroes. And it's like a side-scrolling mech fighting platforming kind of a game. There's a lot of jumping and punching and stuff. It feels... I'm sorry, did I say Gunstar Heroes? I meant Guardian Heroes. Yeah, it feels a lot like Guardian Heroes, except it's on one plane, and it's more of a 16-bit title game instead of a 32-bit. So it's fun. It actually is a lot of fun. So for once, I'm picking a game where the game is as fun as the music is cool. This has a really good soundtrack. A lot of it is much more traditional, kind of rock and FM music. So even if you're not a fan of this one, you might still want to go check out the Genocide 2 soundtrack. You might find some other stuff on there that you like as well. So, I don't know, ready for the next song?
I am.
All right, so this one's a little bit different than the other ones. This is not a traditional FM. Well, it's an FM song, but it's not like a Genesis chip or an arcade chip. It's music composed in FM, but then it's streaming audio because it's a Xbox 360 and PC game is a little bit more modern. So you're going to hear some FM. You're probably going to hear a little bit more of, Redbook audio kind of stuff over it, but the leads are definitely FM instruments, and the composer, Yusuke Yasui, is also a fairly accomplished FM composer in his own right. This is a track called Silver Lining from a shoot-'em-up called Eschatos, and like I said, it was released on the Xbox 360 and the PC.
That awesome track that you guys just heard, that was Silver Lining from the game Eschatos, and it was composed by Yusuke Yasui.
And what an amazing track it was.
That was amazing. And remember earlier in the show when I said that I had some kind of a surprise for you and I didn't want to say too much about it?
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you this. This track has been played on the show before.
Man, well, I mean, at least that means that we both really enjoy it. So I take it as almost like a verification of my tastes, at least for once.
And I'm going to take it one step further, too. It was also a track that you requested to be played on this show.
Oh my goodness. I don't even remember doing that. How long? Yeah. It must have been a while ago.
Yep. This was way back in level 8.
Yeah. Okay.
It was over a year ago that it was played.
That's funny. Because I didn't know anybody else would have even known of this track. It's pretty obscure. Like, it's an Xbox 360 game, but it's not really talked about that much, especially the soundtrack. So it makes sense that if you did play it before, it would have been at my request.
And I thought it was a pretty amazing track. And I'm actually glad that you brought it to the show today.
Again.
Because I remember not really talking about this track all that well. And it was during the pretty early episodes of the show, so I was still kind of trying to find my footing into everything. And I think with you here right now, I think you can definitely explain and talk about this track a lot better than I did.
Well, I think just the fact that you shared it on the show is awesome, especially twice. So I appreciate that, and not being like, no, you can't play this, you're off the show. Because, that's what I would have done to you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, this song has a lot of regret behind it for me, because the first time I ever played this track was actually as an introduction to one of the Pixel Tunes episodes. And I was so pissed at myself that I used it as an intro, and then I felt like I couldn't play it as an actual track to talk about, because back in the day when I was producing Pixel Tunes, I used to pick just a random track to like bring in the show, and it would be the music bed for our first segment, but we wouldn't actually like talk about it. We wouldn't play it all the way through. It would just be like, I would play a 5-second snippet of the song, fade it down, and we'd talk about it. And this was one of those songs. And like after a while, I was like, oh my goodness, this song is so good. Like, I really wish that I had used it as an actual, proper song instead of just an intro. And I don't know why I never was like, why don't I just play it on the show? But for some reason, I felt like I couldn't. So the fact that now it's been on your show twice is pretty awesome. I love that it's such a high energy track. I love that it blends the FM leads with like sampled guitars and some really cool like orchestra hits. Like, it has a lot of that like Konami style arcade stuff along with the FM leads, but then sounds like much more crisp and clear, like it was, a streaming audio or like a Redbook audio kind of a track instead of just FM. So I think it blends the best of all the different kinds of chiptunes together and makes it just one super awesome energy-filled piece of music.
I think what I really like best about this track is how classic it sounds while also sounding modern.
Yeah.
At the same time. Because if you told me that this track came from a game for the Sega Saturn, or maybe in the arcade at that time, I would totally believe you.
No, I definitely agree with you there. And I feel like, me starting the show with Bosconian and ending with this is like a really good kind of a sandwich, because I think that this soundtrack kind of owes a lot to those really classic like FM shoot 'em up soundtracks. And this has a lot of like modern Koshiro aesthetic to it, but also has a lot of classic Koshiro aesthetic to it. So I think kind of like beginning and ending the show with a song like this that's very heroic sounding was just a happy coincidence, because I didn't really plan it like that. But I think this one and Bosconian do share a lot of traits in common, with just the way that they're layered, the energy that they have, the way that they're structured. I don't know, I found this song randomly. I've never actually played this game before. It's another vertical shoot 'em up, and I heard that it was good but not incredible. But this soundtrack just blew me away. Yusuke Yasui's been he was mainly with Capcom for a while. He did like Mega Man Network Transmission, he did Gungrave, a couple of Naruto games, and games that weren't really super popular, but his soundtracks just always seem to be really good, and this is one of my favorites of his.
You were hitting like a lot of good points, and I'm like, I'm not really sure what else to add to that.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say about it either. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I hope that other people enjoy it as well. I think that this is like, I don't know, I just love that there are so many composers out there that have been influenced. Like Yasui started after the whole chiptune era. And a song like this really, it's his way of saying, I owe my musical career to all the guys before me that worked in FM, that did these classic shoot 'em up soundtracks. And here's my take on that. Here's where I can bring it with modern technology and modern composition techniques. This is the evolution of FM shoot 'em up soundtracks. And that's why I love it so much, because it just sounds like it's where game music should be going at this point. And some composers do. Some composers get that chiptune aesthetic and modernize it. Some just still like to do the straight chiptune thing, and that's great too. But I always enjoy when both of those eras are kind of meshed into one very cohesive and well-produced song just like this.
Yeah, I definitely do get that feeling of that he's trying to give respect to, the works of the past while also doing his own thing. Like, hey, this is me, but I'm also giving respects to the creators of before.
Well put. Exactly.
Is there anything else that you want to say about this track? I mean, it's really good.
It is. It's. I don't have too much else to say. It's just great. It's got great energy. It's got again different sections. It follows the tropes of all of my picks for this episode. I think. After hearing this show, if you weren't familiar with my tastes in music, you'll have a very good, and that's not to say that I don't enjoy music in completely different genres and composed in very different ways. But when I think about the music that's really near and dear to my heart, the music that I like functionally understand and feel close to, it's music like this, just FM jams, lots of different parts, lots of different instruments, lots of different solos, a driving beat. Like, these are all the building blocks of the pieces of video game music that I love the most. So if you want to hear more of this, then you can listen to more episodes of VG Embassy or dig back into the old Pixel Tunes radio days, and you'll hear a lot more music like this from me, and more in the future too.
I think I'm gonna do that. Your guys' backlog of episodes and stuff, it's worth digging into. I'm not just saying that because you're on this show. It really is good stuff.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, there was 110 episodes of Pixel Tunes, and there's 65 episodes of VG Embassy now. So I'm not that far away from 200 total episodes between the two shows. So that's a lot of music, especially when there's at least 10 tracks per show. You're looking at a couple thousand pieces of video game music that we've shared over the years.
Well, I'm thinking it's gonna be just about that time to wrap up the show. If you like what you've been listening to, have your friends check out the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever podcatching service that you can think of. I'm more than likely going to be on there. And I know that Ed's show, VG Embassy, it will more likely be on those services, I'm sure.
Absolutely. All the same places.
You can email the show at vgmjourney@yahoo.com, and you can also check us out on Twitter at vgmjourney. Is there any kind of social media stuff that you want to share about your show?
Yeah, for sure. So the VG Embassy is it was a bi-weekly show up until recently. It's going to get back to bi-weekly, hopefully, by the end of the year. And so what I do is I have a different special guest on every episode, or I do a solo show. And my aim is to share the passions of my guest hosts, and they can kind of create their own style video game music podcast, and I'll facilitate that. So we've had tons of guests. Alex has been on. A lot of previous VGM Journey guests have also been on. I mentioned Ryan Steele, who was just on your show a little while ago. Dan Lawton was on. He's been on your show as well, talking about Pokemon. So you'll hear a lot of familiar voices and names on my show as well. You can head over to thevgembassy.com to check out my website. You can listen to all of my shows on the website. I'm on Twitter at the VG Embassy, and you can also check out my Discord by going to thevgembassy.com. And I think that is about it. I'm also on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the cool places where you can get VGM podcasts or just podcasts in general. So, and I've also got a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/thevgembassy and find out how you can take part in my show. And also, we've got a whole bunch of monthly bonus Patreon-only episodes that I do with my buddies Todd and Joe. And so you get some bonus content if you join the Patreon too. So there we go. That's the VG Embassy in a nutshell.
It's a lot of good stuff. I definitely recommend it. Your show kind of inspired this show a little bit. So I just like the idea of sharing your favorite music and your interests, and I like hearing about other people's favorite stuff as well.
Awesome. Yeah, the VG Embassy was created to foster a sense of community in the between lovers and composers of video game music. So I'm really happy when people tell me that the show has kind of helped strengthen the community that we've got going. So that's great to hear.
All right. I think we're going to play things out with one more track, and I'm pretty sure you're going to like this one, Ed. This is the ending theme from Streets of Rage, and it was composed by Yuzo Koshiro. Yes, we're going to double dip on the Yuzo Koshiro.
With an absolutely classic track. Love this one. Alex, thank you so much for having me on the show. I had a blast.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. I got to agree with you. It was a blast.
My pleasure. And I'm always happy to be on other people's shows. So if you got a show, podcast about video game music, or even just games in general, and you want to chat with me, get in touch. I'd be happy to join you.
All right. Have a good week, everyone. And same to you, Ed.
Same to you, sir. Peace out, everyone.